Did you know that the Revelations Easter egg, boss fight, and its ending cutscene was once meant to be entirely different? And recently we've had leaked Black Ops 3 developmental documents that give us a deep dive into what was once planned for the climax of Black Ops 3 Zombies. We literally almost got a full-on Dr. Monty versus the Shadowman boss fight arena, which probably explains why a lot of us fans felt like it was an underwhelming conclusion, with us being so easily able to just trap him and then shoot at him in the same fashion as we did in the Shadows of Evil boss fight, when he was meant to be the most powerful harbinger of the multiverse. It seems like they got held back due to developmental and hardware issues, like is often the case in COD Zombies and probably every single game in existence. As the documents show us, the Easter egg steps and ending to this map were once far bigger in scope than anything we saw in the release version. The biggest part of these changes are illustrated in the documentation on the Dark Arena, which was the internal name for the boss fight room in Revelations. While in the final version of the map, we only see this room during a final confrontation against the Shadowman, the planned version was far more integral to the entire quest. The Dark Arena was originally envisioned as a Dark World variant of Kino de Totem's Theatre, a corrupted, ancient temple used for summoning mini-bosses and completing challenges. This confirms fan speculation over the years about the room's incredibly similar layout to the theatre room in Kino being entirely intentional, as it seems it was merely flipped. It was designed to allow interdimensional interactions between players in the theatre and those in the Dark Arena, creating dynamic cooperative gameplay and challenge mechanics that were ultimately absent from the final map in Revelations. At its core, players in the Dark Arena would be visible as ghostly figures in the theatre, and vice versa. These projections wouldn't just be for show, they were meant to display player states, such as whether they were downed or still fighting. Players in the theatre could also interact with the environment to trigger traps and environmental changes in said Dark Arena, assisting their teammates. This interdimensional feature was meant to be an evolution of mechanics from Shadows of Evil's Beast Mode or Mob of the Dead's Afterlife, where players operated in separate dimensions but had minimal influence over each other, which explains why the Beast Mode was actually found in the files of Revelations. I did a whole video on this back in the day, and there's many things in the Revelations code that are just cut features, and it really is a shame that they never saw the light of day. However, in contrast to Shadows of Evil's Beast Mode, players would have been able to directly manipulate events across dimensions, a concept that was fully scrapped from the final release. Completing these challenges required players to collect and activate unique Apothecon runes, with each rune representing a different elemental or thematic challenge. Entry into the Dark Arena was supposed to involve more immersive mechanics than what we saw in the final product. Players could enter the arena through a rift that would stabilize into a portal once a gateworm was used. Environmental clues like visual distortions, whispering sounds, and debris being sucked into the rift would grow stronger as players carrying the gateworm approached the portal. This sensory feedback system was intended to ensure that players knew when they were close to unlocking the arena, similar to how the Keepers whispered clues in Shadows of Evil, or the Magua heart effect guided players to hidden portals. In fact, there was supposed to be a similar controller vibration mechanic in finding the pods in the cut upgraded Apothecon Servants Easter egg that was going to be on Shadows of Evil. Upon activating the rift, the gateworm would rise into the air, erupting with the dark energy that stabilized the portal. Once the gateworm evaporated, the rift transformed into a stable portal that players could step through. Inside the portal, unique visual effects would emphasize the transition to another dimension, specifically a darker, more corrupted reality, reminiscent of the teleporter effects from Der Riese or the ethereal trails seen in Origins Elemental Staff upgrade sequences. Upon returning to the theatre, the portal's visual effects would reverse, signifying that the player was stepping back into the normal world. Once inside, players would face a timeout sequence unless they activated a challenge. If too much time passed without starting a challenge, toxic corruption smoke would begin to fill the arena, dealing gradual damage to players and forcing them to leave or risk death. The entrance portal in the theatre would close at the start of this sequence, while the exit portal in the Dark Arena would open. If players choose to stay too long, the arena would become increasingly dangerous until until all players were either forced out or downed. This mechanic added a sense of urgency and immersion that never made it into the finished version. One of the most ambitious features of the Dark Arena was its interdimensional cooperative experience. Players in the theater could manipulate various elemental elements to influence the Dark Arena in real time. For example, candles scattered around Kino could be lit to activate flame traps in the arena, and they could be turned off by knifing them, much like the electric puzzle in Origins or the fire traps in Shangri-La, or even the fire trap in the Liberty Falls Church, or picking up the candles for the Gorod Krovi upgraded monkey bombs. Theater spotlights could be adjusted to create damaging light beams inside the arena, similar to the rotating trap mechanics from Shadows of Evil and Mob of the Dead's acid traps. I guess this is the inverse of the light circles that you can go in to stay protected. Players could also manipulate counterweights, where dropping the last bags would disable electric barriers, or resetting them with levers would reactivate those barriers, much like the barriers in Verrucht, Shinonuma, and Der Riese. Additionally, certain theater seats could be moved to open or close pits in the Dark Arena, a feature reminiscent of the sinkholes in Buried. Power-ups could also be purchased and reserved in Kino to be used on altars inside the arena during combat, and allowed for pre-combat planning in the real world. The idea was that each altar could only spawn one power-up per Dark Arena visit. Players could even purchase instances of weapons that would either be placed on the altars or made accessible via wall panels in the Dark Arena, using their points in the real world to create a loadout in the Dark World. This interdimensional cooperation encouraged coordinated teamwork across dimensions, a mechanic entirely absent from the release map. Without these features, the final version felt more disconnected and static, though many of the planned art or effects for these would end up reused in some way for the Revelations boss fights, such as the light beams that I mentioned. The core gameplay of the Dark Arena revolved around room challenges that summoned mini-bosses. Each room challenge had unique hazards and combat phases designed to keep players constantly adapting and making different plans for each one. The light room challenge involved a giant 115 energy ball moving around the arena, reminiscent of the floating Keeper Souls from Der Eisendrache's Voidbow upgrade quest. The ball would periodically flare up, damaging any players who were not standing in the shadowy safe zones. Staying in these shadows was essential to survival, forcing players to focus on movement and positioning. The fire rune challenge involved fire zones moving across the arena, much like the flaming hazards in Gorod Krovi's Dragon Trials. Any zombies that passed through these zones would transform into explosive hazards, creating an elemental fire zombie effect similar to the napalm zombies from Shangri-La. Players had to kite zombies into fireballs to ignite them before defeating them, a mechanic inspired by the Firebow quest in Der Eisendrache, specifically the step where players had to guide a flaming projectile along a set path according to the documentation. The electricity rune challenge introduced metal pillars that created electric arcs across the arena, echoing the electric traps from Der Riese and the Wonderfizz energy arcs in Origins. These arcs formed a grid pattern, and the pattern would change periodically, forcing players to adjust their movements or take heavy damage. More difficult iterations of this challenge would see the patterns shifting unpredictably, creating a near instantaneous death trap for careless movement. The weapon rune challenge was particularly dynamic. Upon activating it, all players' weapons would be removed and they would be given random weapon power-ups. The Shadowman would float above the arena, summoning zombies and using attacks like fireballs and electric blasts. Each phase of this challenge increased in difficulty, but more powerful weapons became available as the battle progressed. The Shadowman would gain additional defense shields with each phase and use elemental attacks to pressure players. The Shadow Rune challenge shrouded the arena in darkness, with black smoke periodically filling different arenas. Players had to kill enemies within specific zones to charge skulls that would eventually attack a shadow entity. Once all skulls were charged, the entity would be imprisoned, and the challenge would end. Each of these challenges represented a unique mini-boss encounter with evolving combat phases and dynamic hazards, and all of them giving different unique rewards. The Dark Arena was also closely tied to the bow quest. To unlock each of the 4 unique bows, players would summon a guide using some kind of cut gateworm weapon. The guide would lead them along a path filled with obstacles and scripted challenges. Along the way, players would need to overcome environmental challenges or dynamic enemy spawns. If the player strayed too far from the guide or was downed, the guide guide would disappear, and the quest would reset. At the end of each path, the guide would break open a runestone to reveal a rune. Players would then use the rune to activate a corresponding mini-boss fight in the Dark Arena. Successfully completing the fight would unlock the bow. Yes, that is right, the bows from the Eisendrache were meant to be featured on this map as well, in addition to so many other returning wonder weapons, such as the ones we saw, the Apothecan's Servant and the Thunder Gun, but got cut due to all of these limitations and probably just too much going on. This map was very ambitious, and it's a shame that so much of it got left on the chopping board. This integration was meant to add both narrative and gameplay depth to the map, but much of it was simplified or removed in the final version. The Dark Arena's environment was heavily influenced by Apothecan corruption. Upon entering, players would hear Apothecan and English voiceovers shift between each other, saying phrases such as "choose your fate." Dynamic lighting changes, dark energy effects, and dripping dark matter were intended to enhance the arena's atmosphere and make it feel like an integral part of the Revelation storyline. These visual and audio cues were designed to create a sense of danger and mystery. Each rune challenge would also trigger unique environmental changes and combat effects tied to the narrative of that rune. For example, freeing the Keeper during the Blood Rune challenge was meant to be a pivotal moment that would have lasting effects on the story and rest of the quest, though the documentation does not say exactly what that was. In terms of visual, audio, and special effects, the Dark Arena was designed to be highly immersive. Corruption smoke, dynamic lighting effects, rune activations, and environmental traps were all outlined to create a dark, otherworldly atmosphere. Custom sound effects for portal openings, trap activations, and mini-boss entrances were also planned. Voiceovers were written for both players and NPCs to convey the arena's narrative stakes and heighten the tension during challenges, all of which are notated here in the document, but we get no specifics as to what they were. Completing each Dark Arena challenge was meant to unlock significant rewards. These included the Keeper Protector, specialist weapons like the DG4 that instead just got placed in the mystery box, and access to the upgraded bows from the Eisendrache. Players would also gain permanent access to certain abilities or items after defeating specific mini-bosses. These rewards were designed to make the Dark Arena feel like a crucial part of the map rather than a side Easter egg or the boss fight arena it became. The development document also mentioned several alternative ideas and features that could be added if time permitted. These included moving mist clouds that would crust over the Fire Rune's lava ball, expanded mini-boss abilities like teleporting and summoning reinforcements, and more variety in random weapon power-ups during the Weapon Rune challenge. These additional features would have added even more depth to the Dark Arena, but they were likely cut due to time constraints. Jason Blundell, of course the creative force behind Black Ops 3 Zombies, confirmed in an interview a while ago that the Revelations map was originally slated to feature a far more ambitious boss fight between the Shadowman and Dr. Monty, versing against each other. Intended as a climactic showdown, this encounter was envisioned to elevate the stakes of the Ether storyline's first conclusion in Black Ops 3, and we can see leftover evidence of this larger scale ending with the Shadowman and Dr. Monty announcer quotes and dialogue left over in the Revelations files.
Kaboom! Bonus points. Carpenter. Double points. Fire sale. Insta-kill. Minigun.
Max ammo. Bonus points. Carpenter. Double points. Fire sale. Insta-kill. Minigun.
I guess this is probably why we saw Dr. Monty physically on the map in the story recap trailer that Treyarch released, recapping all of the prior maps before its release. However, Blundell and the team at Treyarch made the deliberate choice to pull back on this concept, opting instead to save the grandiose execution for a future project, most likely Black Ops 4. This decision hints at plans for either the Blood of the Dead boss fight or the anticipated final boss of the Black Ops 4 Zombies arc, where maybe we would have actually fought Dr. Monty and even the Shadowman on the finale map with Tag de Toten, where such an epic confrontation could have been fully realized. Blundell's comments suggest a strategic move to hold off on exhausting their best ideas, preserving them for a moment when resources and timing could align for maximum impact. But unfortunately, just like Black Ops 3, this vision never fully came to fruition as Black Ops 4 faced its own developmental hurdles, including reported budget constraints and a truncated zombie storyline. Fans were left with the Shadowman and Monty conflict in Revelations as a more subdued affair, and the only time the two would meet, still memorable, but lacking the explosive scale Blundell had teased and envisioned. What could have been a defining moment in Zombies history remains a tantalizing what if, fueling speculation about the untouched potential of that Shadowman vs Monty showdown. In fact, in an interview, Blundell even spoke that there was meant to be extra dialogue in the ending cutscene of Revelations that I'll play for you now.
It's interesting, like, because when I was hearing all the commentary on the way to Revelations, people were saying, well, listen, if they do anything less than a 30-minute cutscene at the end, I'll be disappointed.
I think if you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. There's no way to make a perfect ending. You can't please everyone.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I think it was a perfect ending.
Of course you do. However, he decided to cut this back to be able to refine the cutscene to just the most pertinent and poignant moments, so that every word matters and every word has the maximum impact. I will play a clip from Skype's video they posted a month or so ago, which was actually about these hard drive leaks before they were even publicly leaked, as the ending was initially meant to be a callback to Origins and Samantha talking, which would have come full circle with the storyline. However, definitely would have been unnecessary for this ending, as of course it loops back to the beginnings of the cycle where Primus gets sent back to the Great War, and then we have the scraps of paper show up from Origins, and Samantha was going to talk, essentially saying this is the beginning and the end of the story, similar to the Origins intro cutscene. I'll play that for you now.
You could send us somewhere else, somewhere we've never been.
I suppose I could make a little corner somewhere in history. A place where I can dump some of the other shit that I've left over, or I just wipe you from existence. Ooh, hang on. Actually, that all works out perfectly.
It began long ago, on the battlefields of the Great War. My name is Samantha. I'm going to tell you how all this really began.
And if you want to watch his full video on this cut ending, I will leave a link to it down in this video's description. Ultimately, the Dark Arena as envisioned in the development documents was far more ambitious than what we received in the final version of Revelations. Its dynamic challenges, interdimensional co-op mechanics, and narrative integration would have made it one of the most memorable experiences in the history of zombies. However, due to time constraints and the realities of game development, many of these features were either simplified or cut entirely, as I mentioned at the start. The leaked document offers a fascinating glimpse into what might have been, providing insight into the creative potential that sometimes goes unrealized in the world of game design. It does make me wonder though, had this finale been fully realized, would Black Ops 3 Zombies truly have been set apart as the most content-stuffed and realized version of zombies ever created? Because people still regard it to this way anyways, and Revelations was a controversial map at the time, due to its random Easter egg, collecting rocks, and people feeling underwhelmed by it, as this finale, and even saying the end at the end of the Easter egg, was reusing so many elements from the DLC season, but in a new and gameplay-orientated fashion, which makes for what sounds like something that would have elevated Revelations above any other map prior and maybe since. There was meant to be so many more reused elements for this map. A lot of people felt like because they already knew the sections and Revelations and there wasn't much new, that there just wasn't enough to offer, and they got bored of it quickly. But personally, I think the released version of Revelations is still great. Yes, it was underwhelming, I think, as a finale. However, they were meant to do pretty much 10 times what they wanted to do. There was meant to be so many other cut areas on the map, such as areas on Shadows of Evil, and so much more, and the boss was meant to be so much more grandiose, which would have made the Shadowman feel a lot scarier and apocalyptic, which he was meant to be, lore-wise. But what do you think? Would you have preferred this over the Revelations we got? I don't know why anyone wouldn't. And would you be interested in more videos on cut Black Ops 3 content? Like I said, the Revelations documentation also reveals an entirely different plan to layout of maps we would see rather than what we got. And there's so many other cut things and side Easter eggs on this map that I could talk about Revelations cut content for eons without even touching the other maps. So there's a lot more that I can make videos on. So subscribe if you want to see that and any other content coming, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Are there any particular maps that you want me to focus on in terms of cut content, and I can get to them first over the other ones? Anyways, thank you for watching the video. Make sure to subscribe if you're not here for the latest and greatest Call of Duty news information. So anyways, thank you for watching, and bye.